Assalamu alaikum students. I hope you all are well, safe and healthy at home. I'm your course instructor Farzana Khan. Welcome to all of you in this class of English language teaching. Well, dear students, in a previous class you were taught about grammar translation method and direct method of teaching English language. In today's class, I am here with another important method of teaching English language, which is audiolingual method. Let's start the topic. By the end of today's class, you will be able to understand about the method of audiolingual. You will be able to understand the characteristics of this method and the uses. And finally, you will be able to apply this method in your classes of teaching English language. So pay close attention to the lecture to gain competency on this method of teaching English language. Well, when we talk about the audiolingual method, it is a method of foreign language teaching which emphasizes the teaching of listening and speaking before reading and writing. It uses dialogues as the main form of language presentation and drills. Basically, the focus is given on drills as the main training techniques, and mother tongue is discouraged in the classrooms. Before moving towards the discussion of audiolingual method, let's have a look at the background of the grammar translation method and direct method, which is basically the background of audiolingual method. Grammar translation method was the traditional way Latin and Greek were taught in Europe. In 19th century, it began to be used to teach modern languages such as French, German and English, and it is still used in some countries today. This is basically a typical style of teaching grammatical rules and teaching vocabulary and translation exercises. So the personal understanding of this point is basically the grammatical rules plus the vocabulary translation. So because the grammar translation method emphasizes reading rather than the ability to communicate in a language, so there was a reaction to it in the late 19th century, and there was later a greater emphasis on the teaching of spoken language. Well, it is basically grammar translation method is basically an easy method in which the child proceeds from the known to unknown. It helps in building vocabulary and saves teacher labor, but it is an unnatural method and doesn't follow the natural order of learning a language. It neglects the speech and teaches English by rules, not by use. So in the mid and late 19th century, Europe experienced a wave of increasing opportunities of communication due to industrialization and international trade and travel. So a need was felt to develop oral proficiency in foreign languages. So language teachers basically had already found grammar translation method inadequate and ineffective in developing communicative ability in the learners. So later on, basically the teachers, the educationers, they strongly advocated an alternative method. Language, because they thought that language should be presented in contexts, and principal advocate basically were that there should be a natural method. So the natural method, direct method was suggested. So basically the direct method of teaching focused more on speaking and listening rather than on reading and writing, and it totally ignored the grammatical rules. So in spite of its achievement, the direct method fell short from fulfilling the needs of educational systems. One of its major shortcomings is that it was hard for public schools to integrate. So later on, after a short popularity in the beginning of the 20th century, it soon began to lose its appeal because of the constraints. So it then paved the way to the audiolingual method. So audiolingual method was widely used in the United States and other countries in 1950s and in 1960s. It is still used in some programs today. It is also known as oral method, the army method, and the new method. So this method, audiolingual method, is basically similar to the direct method in a sense that it basically focuses on the approach of improving pronunciation, and the ability of speaking in the target language is considered superior, because in the audiolingual method the focus is given on improving the speaking and listening skill, and after gaining competency in speaking and listening skill, the focus is given on improving the reading and writing skill. So in this sense, it is similar to the direct method, that oral based approaches are given preference here, because the focus is given to improving pronunciation and vocabulary, everyday vocabulary. And grammar is basically here learned inductively, and it is different from the direct method, as basically it is also different from the direct method because not only vocabulary but also grammatical sentence patterns are also taught in this method. Because in the direct method the focus is given only to the vocabulary, not the grammatical patterns. But in audiolingual method the focus is also given on improving the grammatical sentence patterns, and these patterns are provided by the teachers to the students, and students improves and gain competency on language by continuously repeating those patterns. So stronger theoretical base in linguistics, structural linguistics, and psychology, behavioral psychology are basically the basis of audiolingual method. So this method is founded around 1950s and 1960s, and it is based on structural linguistics, which is basically the behavioral psychology. According to their point of view, the language is learned through repetition and through imitation, and same rule is followed in audiolingual method, because here the language is acquired as the sentence pattern of the target language is repetition of dialogues about everyday situations that are imitated and drilled to make the response automatic. Basically, the teachers provide the language pattern, sentence pattern of the target language to the students in the form of the dialogues and in other types of drills, and students basically repeat and imitate all those patterns to gain competency on the target language. When we talk about the structural linguistics, according to the point of view of the structural linguistic, the language theory is that language is a system of structural related elements like phonological units, grammatical units, and lexical items for the transmission of meaning. So to learn the target language is to understand the elements of the target language system. So according to the structural linguistics, the theory of language is that it is basically a system of elements. It's a structure of elements, and those elements are phonological units, means the sounds, grammatical units mean the syntactical structure, and the lexical items means the words which have meaning. So the sounds and the words having sounds are arranged keeping in mind the grammatical rules. This is basically the language, and which is used for the transmission of meaning. Basically, the language is used to convey the meaning. It is basically a medium. So to learn the target language is to understand the elements of the target language system. So according to the structural linguistic point of view, the language theory is that to gain competency on language or to learn any language, it is important to understand the elements of the target language, means the phonological units, grammatical units, and lexical items. For this purpose, in audiolingual methods, the proper patterns and structure of a language is provided by the teacher to the students. Means sounds, according to the grammatical structure and having lexical items which with specific purpose to transfer the meaning are provided by the teacher, and students basically repeat all those patterns to gain competency on the target language. So behavioral psychology, according to them, the learning theory is that language learning is habit formation, and mistakes, the bad habits, should be avoided. According to them, as the students learn through repetition and through drills, so the mistakes should be avoided, because the continuous repetition of the mistakes will make their habit, and they will not be able to avoid that particular habit. So language skills are learned more effectively if they are presented orally first, then in written form. So according to them, the focus should be given on the spoken skills first. Main focus should be given to improving the spoken and the listening skills of the students, and after that the preference should be given to reading and writing, because if someone is good at speaking and writing, so he can read, and speaking and listening, then he can read and write well. So language skills are learned more effectively if they are presented orally. So according to their point of view, the teacher should demonstrate the language skills to the students first, and after that the focus should be given on the writing skills. So the objectives of the audiolingual methods are to enable students to speak and write in the target language, to make students able to use target language automatically without stopping to think, and to form new habits in the target language. Basically, their focus, their aim and objectives are to enable students to speak and write in the target language, and they start from the speaking skill and listening skill, and after that reading and writing skill. To use target language automatically without stopping to think, their purpose is that the students should start thinking even in the target language, to form new habits in the target language, because their purpose is to improve the writing and speaking and listening skills through the practice. So they focus on developing the habit of talking in the target language. So the principles of audiolingual methods are speaking and listening competence preceded reading and writing competence, because first focus is given on improving the speaking and listening, and after that the focus is given to improving the reading and writing competence. So use of MT is highly discouraged in the classroom. Use of machine translation is highly discouraged in the classrooms, and the development of language skills is a matter of habit formation, because their purpose is to develop the habit of thinking and speaking in the target language. So students practice particular patterns of language through structured dialogue and drill until response is automatic, and these patterns of language are provided by the instructor, by the teacher, and students practice all those patterns until they become competent and they become able to automatically think and talk in the particular target language. So structured pattern in language are taught using repetitive drills, because it is their point that through the repetition and through the imitation, the students can gain competency on the target language. The emphasis is on having students produce error-free utterances. Their focus is always on providing the error-free language pattern to the students, and students should avoid all types of errors, because they do think that students learn language through the imitation. So if they continuously imitate the wrong patterns, then they will develop the habit of uttering the wrong sentences. So this method of sports kinesthetic learning styles. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences are taught. Concrete vocabulary is basically taught through demonstration, objects and pictures, and abstract vocabulary is taught through association of ideas. And the printed word must be kept away from the second language learner as long as possible, because first of all their focus is on improving the listening and speaking skills of the candidates. So let's talk about the grammar teachings, that what is the point of view of the audiolingual method for teaching grammar to the students. Basically, explicit rules are not provided here like the grammar translation method, and student induce the rules through examples and drills. Whatever the pattern the teacher provide to the students, they improve and they get the idea about the grammatical rules through those particular patterns. Well, when we talk about the vocabulary teaching, so meaning is taught directly to the students, and vocabulary is introduced through dialogues and not independently. They do teach vocabulary through dialogues, and everyday vocabulary is added in the dialogues to improve the competency of speaking of the students. And when we talk about the syllabus, it is basically the structural syllabus which is designed by the teacher, by the instructor, keeping in mind the level and the grade of the students. Let's talk about the techniques of audiolingual method. These are some techniques which are used in the audiolingual method: dialogue memorization, backword build-up, expansion drill, repetition drill, chain drill, transformation drill, and question answer drill. Let's talk about these techniques of the audiolingual method one by one. The first technique of audiolingual method is basically the memorization. So here the dialogues are basically given by the teacher, and students are basically memorize those dialogues, and the dialogues also conducted between the student and the teacher. Here you can see the example: the teacher, hello, how are you? And the student is replying, fine, thanks, and you. And the teacher is replying, fine, where are you going? And the student is replying, I'm going to the school, would you like to come? And the teacher, sure, let's go together. So these type of dialogue are given in the initial level, and the students do memorize these dialogue to gain competency on the language patterns, vocabulary, grammatical patterns of their target language. So the next technique of audiolingual method is backward up drill. So backward up drill is basically a technique to teach long lines of dialogues. Here that if the lines and sentences are long and the students are unable to pronounce and to speak utter that particular line, so the teacher basically break down the line into several parts and repeat a part of the sentence. Follow the teachers, students expand what they repeated part by part until they are able to repeat the entire line. Let me explain this point with an example. Here you can see the example: the teacher, repeat after me, post office, and the student is repeating post office, and after that teacher is saying to the post office, and the student is repeating to the post office. And after that teacher has added another part of the line, going to the post office, and the student is repeating going to the post office. And lastly, the teacher is uttering the complete line of the sentence, I am going to the post office, and the student is imitating, repeating, I am going to the post office. So this is basically called backward build-up drill, when the lines are long and for the students to repeat or utter in front of the teacher. Another technique of audiolingual method is a repetition drill. Basically, students repeat the teacher's model as accurately and as quickly as possible to learn the lines of the dialogue. Because the repetition, this is basically the point and the principle of this method to gain competency on the target language. So the teacher basically read in front of the students, and students repeat after the teacher to gain competency on that particular language pattern. So the next technique is chain drill. This is basically the drill to make student ask and answer question with each other. Here the teacher assigned some kind of questions to the students and asked them to talk to each other and communicate to each other by asking the questions and giving answer to each other. It basically allows some controlled communication among the students and give the teacher an opportunity to check students' speech. This is another kind of technique which is basically used by the audiolingual method. You can use the audiolingual method, which is basically the transformation drill. Here basically the teacher asks the students to transform the particular pattern, the particular sentence into an other form, to change a certain kind of sentence pattern to an other form. For instance, the teacher can give the statement to the students and ask the students to transform that statement into the question or interrogative form. And teacher can give the active voice to the students and can ask student to transform that active voice into passive voice. Similarly, the teacher can give affirmative sentence to the students and ask to transform it into negative sentence. And similarly, a direct speech can be given to the student to transform it into indirect speech. This is basically called the transformation drill. Here are the examples of the transformation drill. Basically, you can see here the teacher is giving the sentence to the student, they are going to the bank, and student is transforming this tense into interrogative sentence, are they going to the bank? Or the teacher can give a simple statement, active voice to the student, Sarah buys a new car, and the student has transformed this particular statement into passive voice, a new car is bought by Sarah. So this is basically the transformation drill which is used in the audiolingual method. Another technique is question answer drill. Students practice the target language with answering questions and the question patterns. Students answer the teacher questions quickly. For instance, the teacher can ask, how are you? Where are you from? And student can respond to such type of questions. Similarly, the teacher can increase the level of complexity of the questions, keeping in mind the grade and the level of the students. So techniques of question and answer drill here, let me show you the examples. Here you can see, are you going to the bank? And the student is replying, yes, I am going to the bank. The teacher is asking question, are you going to the zoo? And student is replying, no, I'm not going to the zoo, I'm going to the library. So through these type of drills in the audiolingual method, the speaking skills are improved. So the basic characteristics of the audiolingual method are these. The focus is given on the pronunciation, because here the instructor provides the pattern of the language. So first of all, the pronunciation of the students is improved because he listens and then he imitates and speaks. After that, grammar is also is the focus in this method, because the pattern is provided by the teacher, and the teacher also provide the accurate pattern to the students, and students imitate that particular pattern. Vocabulary is also improved, and the focus is given on the everyday vocabulary. And the teaching materials is basically the syllabus, and further things are basically already planned by the teacher. So the other features are these of this method. You can see the listening and speaking. The first priority is given to listening and speaking. The teacher demonstrates certain patterns and the students imitate. So in this way, the listening and speaking is improved, and after that the focus is given on reading and writing. So it also depends on the context, because whatever the teacher provides, he or she keep in the mind, and that the dialogue should be according to the context. So over learning, student learn to answer automatically without stopping to think, and language cannot be separated from the culture. whatever the teacher is giving, the pattern, the dialogues, and whatever the other drill the teacher is giving, it definitely related to the particular context and the culture. So the nature of student teacher interaction, let's talk about it. Most of the interaction is between teacher and student and is initiated by the teacher, because it is the teacher who provides everything to the student for the imitation, for the repetition. And the role of teacher and student is that the teacher is like an orchestra leader, right, and providing students with a good model for imitation, because he provides models and pattern of languages. That's why he's a leader. So students are only the imitators, because they are bound to imitate the teacher for improving the speaking skill. Here you can see the teacher is directing to the student, and the interaction between teacher and student is that teacher is the leader giving pattern to the students, and student is an imitator who is imitating the pronunciation, the grammatical pattern, grammatical rules of the pattern which is provided by the teacher to the student. So how is language viewed in audiolingual method? Everyday speech is emphasized in the audiolingual method, and keeping in mind the context and the particular culture. The level of complexity of the speech is graded so that beginning students are presented with only simple patterns, and later on the higher level students are provided the complex pattern of the language. So culture consists of the everyday behavior and lifestyle of the target language speakers. The focus is also given on the context too. What areas of language are emphasized? Basically, vocabulary is kept to a minimum while the students are mastering the grammatical patterns, because here the focus is given on improving the pattern too along with the vocabulary. So everyday simple vocabulary is provided through the dialogues and other type of drills. So the oral skills receive most of the attention, and pronunciation is taught from the beginning, because all the points are provided by the teacher. That's why the sounds which the teacher is uttering will be imitated by the student. That's why focus is given on oral skills, spoken skills, along with the pronunciation. The role of the student's native language. So basically the target language is used in the classroom, not the student's native language. We have discussed in the previous class that in grammar translation method, the target language, the rules of the target language are explained by the teacher while using the native language. But keep it in your mind that in the audiolingual method, the target language is used in the classroom, not the native language. On the question arises that how is evaluation accomplished by the instructor in the classroom? Students might be asked to distinguish between words in a minimal pair, for example, to supply an appropriate verb from in a sentence or in an exercise. Similarly, different patterns of the language are also evaluated. So how does the teacher respond to the student errors? Basically, student errors are to be avoided if at all possible through the teacher's awareness of where the students will have difficulty and restriction of what they are taught to say. Right, so here the focus is given because the pattern are usually provided by the teacher and students are the imitator, so there are less chances of committing errors. So wherever the students are making errors, teachers are aware and they can understand and they can make correction. So the role of instructional materials. So the role of instructional materials in the audiolingual method assist the teacher to develop language mastery in the learner. Tape recorders and audio-visual equipments often have central roles in an audiolingual course because they start from the speaking skills and listening skills. For this purpose, the recordings and audio-visual equipments are required. Let conclude this complete method of teaching English language. Basically, language is speech, not writing, and language is a set of habits, because we do communicate and we adopt certain type of patterns for communication, and we follow those particular pattern when we do communicate. That's why they do call that a language is a set of habits. So teach the language, not about the language. This is the slogan, this is the point of view of the audiolingual method. That's why they avoid talking in the mother tongue or native language into the classroom, and they focus on giving instruction and each and everything in the target language. So a language is what native speakers say, not what someone else thinks they ought to say. For this purpose, the pattern are provided by the demonstrator, by the instructor and teacher. So languages are different. That's why the students and the learners can learn language through the imitation and through the repetition. This is all about the audiolingual method. So dear student, in today's class you learned about the audiolingual method, that what is the historical background of the audiolingual method, what is audiolingual method, and what are the important techniques which can be used in the classroom following the audiolingual method of teaching English language. Well, I hope all points are clear to all of you. In case of any confusion, you can contact me and you can discuss with me. So we will wind up the lecture here. Stay at home, keep yourself safe and your family safe from COVID-19. Take care. Allah Hafiz.